Hey, I'm Brian Baute, here with Dale Vander Wall, who is higher education industry advisor at Salesforce. And Dale and I have been having some really interesting conversations about how we both see higher education and technology trends in 2023. So wanted to bring you that conversation. Dale, will you introduce yourself and share some of your perspective about where we are in higher ed and technology as we go into this year?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Brian. It's great to be with you. Um, just wanted to give you a little background of who I am. I am an industry advisor, but only been here at Salesforce for about a year and a half. And before that, I was at the University of Maryland in College Park for 30 years. Started out in student affairs, resident life, and worked for the VP for student affairs, and then jumped over to academic affairs and worked in an academic college, as well as helped start a big research center. And then the last 8 years was as assistant dean and chief operating officer of the Robert H. Smith School of Business there. And I was really fortunate to be able to work on a Salesforce implementation at the business school, but then also with the campus, thinking about how we would use CRM and Salesforce specifically on the campus to support the entire student journey. So that's my story, and really excited to be here to talk to you today.
Great, really happy to have you here. So in that role with Salesforce currently, and with all of that great varied experience in your background from student to academics to the business school, 2023 is another unique year that we all get to face. Where do you see things are now, and where colleges and universities are heading?
Well, it's a great question. I'm not sure I'm perfectly suited to predict the future, but from all the conversations that I have with customers, things that I've been reading and watching for many years, I've studied higher education for my entire career. So I think some of the trends that I'm seeing, I think technology is more important than ever. I think everyone is recognizing that, and I think coming out of the pandemic, that was just such a salient point of understanding the need for great technology and how it was supporting all aspects of the university. One of the things that we saw in our connected student report at Salesforce, we just published that last fall, the third edition. Students recognize that universities that provide a great digital experience also they have a great student experience, and so that really validates that idea that technology is critical to the student experience. The second thing that I would say is, this idea of platform versus point solution, and I was never a technology person, but that idea of how all of those little point solutions that universities love to buy across the campus that do one or two things really well
Mhm.
and supports exactly what a particular office wants to do. You could
Right.
even think of a spreadsheet as a point solution. All of those things really create a very disconnected experience for students and faculty and staff. And so the idea that we bring to the conversation at Salesforce is this platform idea of bringing the technology together, the data together, the people together in one place so that you can engage with your constituents, whether they be students, alums, corporate partners, whatever they might be. Um,
Yeah, no,
and
I
then
think that that's a super interesting perspective, coming out of the pandemic, and you and I have both been around long enough to see kind of the longer time horizon of, a lot of us have seen the pandemic lockdown timeframe as an acceleration of what was already coming. We could go back to when email came to campuses, or the rise of learning management systems, which were one of the first kind of web-based front ends that almost everybody on campus, in terms of students and faculty in the academic enterprise, used. And then through the 2010s and the app explosion. And then during the pandemic, I know at my campus, I was previously a CIO at Queen's University of Charlotte. We added, at least 9 new enterprise pieces of software, different point solutions, as you mentioned, during the pandemic. And now we're at this point of, I think, everybody is feeling that that pressure. You can call it switching costs. You can call it app fatigue. And how do we normalize that? And we've gone through this big, really necessary expansion. Like you said, a lot of these point solutions are really, really effective in the things that they do and are sometimes necessary, but we can't always only add new solutions. We have to then find ways to say, how can we bring those back together and maybe replace 5 or 6 different point solutions with one new platform? And we're always going to have a mix of some really key platforms that our campus uses and some needed point solutions, but finding that right balance. If it's only platforms, then there are gaps and cracks in there that aren't met. If it's only point solutions, then it's just chaos. And each
Yes.
individual department might say, we have a great experience. But when you zoom out and you see, here's what the student experience or the employee experience overall looks like, it's chaos trying to manage all of those different things. So the balance is a real art and a real science of finding what's the right fit.
No, I love that. And I think that really dovetails nicely with kind of one of the other trends that I'm seeing. And I love this part of what I get to do and see is bringing together the kind of the front end users, the academic folks, the student affairs folks, and the IT folks. It's not just the IT folks saying, here's our next big solution that we think is going to solve your problem, without a lot of conversation. I think everyone's recognizing that they bring to the conversation particular perspectives and
Mhm.
particular expertise that really helps them get to a better outcome. And so I think more and more people are recognizing that and seeing the need for those conversations of not starting with the technology per se, but really starting with pain points, what you're trying to accomplish, the kinds of experiences you want to provide for your students or your employees or your alums, and letting that drive the conversation so that you really do get a better outcome instead of, well, I'm just going to go off and get my little solution that I know my other colleagues use. I'm going to work together with my IT team to be able to get a better, more robust, more sustainable kind of solution. So
Right.
that I think is so critical.
You keep using the word experience, which I want to come back to, which I think is so great. And a lot of that to me comes from kind of flipping that perspective and looking at it, as you say, from the student perspective or from the faculty member perspective. And what is their experience, both physically on campus and digitally? Because I think for the vast majority of students, it's not going to be one experience or the other. Either they're an on-site student or they're an online student, but almost everybody is going to be in a blended mode in some way or fashion. So talk more about that student experience and the employee experience, and how we can really optimize both.
Yeah, I love thinking about this, talking about it. I think it's so important because what I have found is, even now, even though we've come out of the pandemic and it's been such a front and center conversation, people still want to kind of go back to their, what's easiest for me, how do I get my job done, instead of really taking the perspective of whoever they're serving and saying, okay, what is the experience that we want them to have? And unfortunately, when they do that, it kind of flies in the face of what people are experiencing in the rest of their lives. I think we all recognize, and people talk about that Amazon experience, the Netflix
Mhm.
experience.
Yep.
That's what students are seeing outside of their university experience. And when they come to their university paying a lot of money and expecting a lot, oftentimes that doesn't pan out and creates a lot of discouragement, unhappiness, and even some disconnection, I think, from students. We see so much disengagement, so much disconnection. And I think some of it, I'm not going to pin it all on us as university folks, but I think some of it is because they just keep hitting their heads up against that wall of, well, you
Right.
just don't know me, you don't understand me. Everything is so unknowable. I can't figure out how to get through this bureaucracy, and so I think that experience and really creating a seamless, connected experience for students, for faculty and staff as well. Like I said, if you don't provide a great experience for faculty and staff, they will have a hard time creating the same thing for students and for their constituents. And so
Right.
it all is part of that solution that I think we all are looking for and so important to provide.
Yeah, and it's a real challenge. It's a really hard thing to do
So
because,
hard.
all of these departments around campus, I come from more of an IT perspective, you come from more of a student and academic perspective, and we see it in athletics and we see it in back office processes and we see it in advancement and all these other areas. They have real limitations on the amount of staffing they have, on the tools they have to work with. They're, clearly incentivized and held accountable for particular metrics and particular performance, which drives them to, do the best they can. All of us, we're doing the best we can to find the ways to do our jobs and to provide that experience that we can. And it's really tough to bring all of those together and to kind of step back for a minute and detach from the current moment, which is way easier said than done, and see it from that 30,000 foot view, from that total student experience perspective. But it's really important. One of the things I love about higher education is to a person, almost everybody I have ever worked with really cares about students and really wants students to succeed. And seeing it from that perspective and saying, how can we make that easier for them? I've had some of my own kids in college over the last 5 years, and boy, like I really thought I was in tune with the student experience. But man, having my own in college puts an even bigger focus on that when I hear their frustrations. And all of my kids have gone to great universities, but it's like there's a lot of moving pieces and it's a lot going on. And I think that perspective and that focus that you're bringing to the primacy of the student experience, the employee experience, and how you bring all that together is really, really important. And I think that's really where we are in 2023. We've had this almost 3 year now journey through COVID and the lockdown phase, and then we were kind of coming out of it. And this academic year is kind of the return, and great. We're back on campus, which is really exciting. And now we're figuring out what's the right mix going forward. How do we create that hybrid student experience and employee experience that takes the best of the on-campus experience, where that's really, really important? How can we then use the best of online experiences, where those are the best fit for different roles, and create all of that into a really effective mix for the students that we serve, which looks really different. Most of my context when I was CIO and an IT leader on campus was smaller private universities, less than 10,000 students for most of my career. You spent your whole career at a very large, really great state system. So it's a different fit at different places. But I think some of these principles that we've talked about kind of go through all of those different contexts. Anything else you would wrap us up with?
Yeah, as you were talking, I was just thinking of a great quote that I love from a president who said, what we want to do at our university is to make everything in the classroom as rigorous as possible, everything outside the classroom as easy as possible. And I love that idea because I think
Yeah.
sometimes we, get accused of, oh, well, all we care about is service and the kind of the student experience outside the classroom. And I think that that's the wrong approach. I think what's great about universities is what happens in the classroom, but that's not the only thing that happens at universities. And so
Right.
recognizing that all of it together, whether it's the academics, whether it's the co-curricular, whether it's just the transactional stuff, all of it works together to create that student experience.
Right.
And the better we can integrate that and the better we can connect it, like you said, from that 30,000 foot perspective, and then digging into the details, because it is hard to actually implement those things, the better off we'll be. And I think everyone is starting to recognize that in different ways. And I think I'm
Right.
really excited to see. I think we're just at the very forefront of where we're going to go as universities. I think it's going to take some time for people to really truly understand how it can work. And then it's going to slowly start to move in the right direction. And we're starting to move already. And there's first movers and others too.
Right.
So I love to kind of watch it from that perspective, because I think there's going to be some great things happening in the years to come.
I agree. I've been in this game since about the year 2000, and I've never been more excited about the opportunity that we all have to work with technology to bring it to bear for the benefit of students and faculty and the whole college experience. So, Dale, thanks for your time. Really, really great talking with you. And for those watching, we'd love to continue the conversation in the comments. So please share your perspective and ask any questions, and we'll continue the conversation there. Thanks.
Thanks, Brian.